but those are my questions and my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Tosi. Any other questions, Mr. Phelps?
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem, and thank you, presenters, and listening audience that is here. Those of us that have communities within the former Bennett Freeze area, as was brought up by Honorable Curley here, we dream about ways to rehabilitate our communities. Nasio nejo tanada di kanda adon khachendo khatada ayatero papa pestahadita bada di nis to kon sakhisto konbayati. And we have met many times with the leaders in my district and others from neighboring chapters, brainstorming and looking at ways to find the keys to rehabilitate and to see our communities flourish. But I also find that there has to be buy-in. There has to be community support. Our people at home have to understand the complete impact. They have to understand the complete plan, the picture, and why not a referendum? That's sometimes it seems like it's the only way, rather than just throwing a decision into the lap of the leaders, is to put that decision back into the hands of the people and to have them evaluate and give guidance to the leadership in that way. But this past week we were in D.C. and we had some very good discussions, and we're like I mentioned, we're doing everything we can to find solutions, to find ways to find steps that can be taken towards the rehabilitation of communities that have been severely affected. So, but I also want to acknowledge that we have some of the brightest and the best Navajo young people in Washington, D.C. They're there as interns. They're with the Washington Internship Program for Native American Students, WINS project. It's known the WINS program, and I think maybe some of our children have gone there. And I just so happen to have a nephew over there right now as a WINS student, and I was just tickled to death and proud of him, and asked him, what are you doing? Where are you at? And it just so happens that he was assigned to an office that works directly with all the federal agencies all the federal agencies, and they work with the programs relating to historic preservation and cultural resources. And so I was able to sit down with the director and several directors there and really sit down and visit with them to see what they do and how they work. And so I guess their job is to consult with the federal agencies and with the tribes to make sure that these federal agencies address, through consultation with tribes, federal laws that are already there. For example, the National Historic Preservation Act, of course NEPA, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, and then the Indian Sacred Sites Executive Order, the Consultation and Coordination with Tribal Governments Executive Order, and the Executive Order on Environmental Justice. These are just some of the laws that this office is working with to provide that type of support to tribes. In listening to it and trying to understand what their role was, I began to wonder. I know that the western portion along the Grand Canyon, the border that we have along the Grand Canyon, is basically under Navajo Parks and Recreation. Navajo Parks and Recreation, you know, so these are, so I'm thinking, we have Navajo Historic Preservation, and we have Navajo NEPA, and we have these agencies internally. And have they had a chance also to provide input on this initiative? You know, have they had a chance also to provide reviews? Maybe they're not at that stage yet, but I think that it's important that they do, because the laws are there that they have to work with. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Phelps, thank you. Any other questions from colleagues? Real quick, before we go back to the presenters, Mr. Cody has an introduction that he wants to make, so, sir.
Yes, Matado, before the police officer escorts me out, let me do a quick introduction. Immediate, we did our Title 4E agreement, signing agreement. It's a historic event that we did. So I would like to introduce the Associate Commissioner to you, Associate Commissioner Ju Chang. Can you stand? She came to us in Washington, D.C., so she's visiting Navajo, and she'll do a site visit also. Ms. Eileen West is our project officer in D.C. Hannah Pianco is our person in San Francisco Region 9. And then our other partners in this whole effort of improving services for our Navajo children is Casey Family Programs. Joan Pollock, she's the board of trustees for Casey. Marva Hammond, then Anita Fine. And then Melissa Clyde, our very own, she's a Navajo that works in Denver. And then our other, Mark Swartz is our partner from Arizona. From the new Department of Service Safety. So these are the individuals that we did a signed agreement with that will really improve services not only for the children but for the foster parents and also for the other thing that Casey will help us do, which I would like your involvement is we're going to do a effort council. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Cody, thank you. Okay, with that, Mr. Hale, I'm going to respond with two questions. Mr. Curley and Mr. Sosi, if you're in the chambers, could you please get back to your seat so your questions can be answered? Mr. Hale.
Mr. Chairman Pro Tem and leaders of the Navajo Nation and people who are in the chambers visiting delegates or officials who've been recognized. Mr. Chair, members, what I heard mostly was a discussion on a more general type of policy discussion from Mr. Curley and also Mr. Sosi. But these are the ones that I think need to be responded to. One is reference to what the people want. And as I stated earlier in my presentation, at Badaway chapter, there is a resolution, regardless of whether that resolution won by 5 members or whether it won by over 100, like over in the resolution concerning the URI, which you're going to be dealing with, I think, under new business. The point that I'm getting at is that the majority, under our system, the majority rules. So if you have the majority voting for a resolution, that is indicative of a support from the local communities. Until that changes, our system of government says that will be followed. So that's my response to that particular matter. And secondly, there was a discussion about the litigation. Certainly, any project that you get into, there will be potential for litigation and potential for liability. And I'm sure you have a number of them that you are familiar with. Those projects over in Shiprock, for example, and the projects that you had, the projects that that was referred to, the purchase of the coal mine. Those all have potential liabilities, and you're never going to get away from those. The thing that can be done is to minimize those liabilities through due diligence, through knowledge about the project, and then having your lawyers and our lawyers, that's the Confluence Partners lawyers, negotiate so those liabilities are minimized. With regard to the statistics that I threw out there, and my intention wasn't to lay blame on this council or anybody else. All I was doing was stating facts. And I'm not pointing at anybody to say these facts are a result of your action or inaction. That's not my place to say so. So I stated, as you will recall, that these are the realities in which we find ourselves. And these are the realities that we have to deal with. Our children are sitting over here throughout the nation looking to us to find solution to those realities that I just pointed out. And that's my only intent in pointing out those statistics. And then what is going on with the president? We've been meeting with the president, and I earlier stated that we had a representative from the president's office as part of the negotiation, and that's with Tone. And we had lawyers from the Department of Justice part of the negotiation. We had a lawyer who's reportedly versed in these types of agreements and developments, who was contracted by Navajo Department of Justice. And they were part of the team. And what we have now are 3 agreements: operating agreement, master agreement, and development agreement. Those are the three agreements that were negotiated between the negotiation team from both sides. So that's where we're at. And those agreements will be put into the legislative process and be moving forward. And a lot of the terms of those agreements spell out the role and responsibility of the different parties. I mentioned that very briefly when I was doing my presentation. But the agreement, once it gets to you, you can look at that and determine what the roles and responsibilities are. And you can also look at how those liabilities that have been raised as concern are being minimized. So those are some of the things that will be made evident when you take a look at those agreements. And the other question was meeting with medicine men. Throughout this course of this action, we have met with individual medicine men, and as you're aware, medicine men who are in the area are most familiar with the stories regarding that site. And in fact, we went down to the Confluence to make an offering and listen to the stories that the medicine men had regarding the Confluence. But I want to make this perfectly clear that the trend that we refer to and the walkway at the bottom of the canyon never touches the Confluence. It's above the Confluence and is contained. That walkway, there's bars around. There will be bars around it, so people do not wander over into the Confluence where the two rivers actually come together. So I want to point that out because we cannot do anything below the high water mark. The high water mark in our conclusion is the Navajo Nation boundary. And we can do anything above that. When I say we, I'm talking about the Navajo Nation, can do anything above the high water mark. And that's where the walkway is going to be. And there's not going to be anything going down to the Confluence. And of course, that when you have development like this, it gives you the opportunity to do preservation. Right now, when we were doing an offering, for example, we were sitting right there at the banks. And you see all these rafts coming up, right where we were sitting, and beaching there, unloading their group, and they will be walking up the small or the little Colorado, and they would be bathing in there. And some of them would be running behind the bushes there and relieving themselves. That's the situation that exists with regard to the Confluence itself that we deem to be sacred. But with this type of development, there's preservation that can be done. There's protection that can be done. Nation can send its enforcement officers, the resources enforcement officers, down to that area to enforce Navajo policy and preserve those sacred sites. But again, I should reiterate that on the 240 acres up on top and then down the tramway that goes down and the walkway at just above the high water mark, there are no identified sacred sites in those areas. And indeed there are some that are identified, and during the course of further development, we'll certainly accommodate that. We'll certainly make every or engage in every way to preserve that and protect that. And that's our commitment and has always been our commitment. There was just, for purpose of correction, I think there was a statement that was made that CP brought Hopi friends at the last meeting. At the last meeting, CP was not here making the presentation. That was folks who were in opposition to the project. So that just want to make that correction. And there was also a question about whether the Navajo Nation Historic Preservation Department has been involved in the discussion and development of this project. And with that, Mr. Keith Lampartner is more familiar with that and has been involved in that aspect of the development. So if you don't mind, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I'll turn the floor over to him so he can make that presentation. Keith, thank you.
Yeah, very quickly. Historic preservation's been involved in this project since its inception, and has had a great deal of involvement and advice to us. Excuse me. They initially accompanied us to the Confluence and asked us to make some fairly significant changes to the configuration of the project, the layout of the project, and where we were placing the project, we have accommodated. We've also had significant involvement with them ongoing. The location, presence, and nature of sacred sites and traditional cultural places is exhaustively documented. There are very few mysteries to that. We actually had quite a presentation we wanted to put on today, but because our time was cut short, we were unable to show it. But just so you know, I think we are aware of what sites are there. Hopi and Navajo, by law, the National Park Service and the Grand Canyon have had to do exhaustive studies and identification, so we also have their information available. The next step in the process is for the Navajo Nation to grant a conditional use permit for us to do all of the investigations and studies and reports that are required by Navajo law for compliance. This is for all projects on the Navajo Nation. This process has to go forward. Under the legislation that's been placed in the Legislative Council's office, Confluence Partners has agreed to pay for all of the costs of those investigations and reports. It will then go to the Cultural Preservation Office for evaluation and final determination. That final determination is really out of our hands. It's up to them. Under the terms of the agreement, if there are irreconcilable conflicts or problems, then the project essentially automatically terminates. There's no cost or risk to the nation, and there's no ongoing project. It ceases at that point. So that's the status. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, presenters. My colleagues, any other questions? If not, let's go ahead and call for the vote. Questions? Mr. Curley and Mr. Weatherspoon.
Preliminary discussions of the price tag Navajo Nation at $65 million. Is that correct? No, that's true. And I guess the first question should be Navajo Nation. What's the Navajo Nation shared project? Is there going to be a Navajo Nation shared project? And I'm here, if so, I hear that the price tag is about $65 million. The Navajo Nation, what's your name? This stuff.
Mr. Weatherspoon?
Thank you, Pro Tem, colleagues, those present with us here today, and presenters. My concern about what was detailed in terms of cultural sacred sites kind of speaks opposite of what the nation has been advocating in terms of protection of sacred sites, not only for Hopi, but also for Navajo. I had a chance to visit the area with family from the region and look at the place where the gondola would be located. And I have to fully disagree with Mr. Hale's assessment that the whole area or region is considered sacred. So to pick, oh, this is a particular burial site, or this is the actual salt trail, or this is where the two rivers meet, and to say, okay, here's the location, this is considered sacred, and we can rope it off or block, fence it in, is not in conjunction with essentially a larger concept. And certainly my advocacy with the United Nations, as we were speaking about the San Francisco peaks, and we were advocating for the need for U.S. Additional laws that would protect sacred places in terms of an area, just like you have national parks, and Yosemite National Park is considered as a park that is considered protected. And so we would be looking also to have identified sacred areas considered protected as well. And so my concern, essentially trying to reach the international standards in terms of protection of sacred sites, in terms of what would override essentially the ability to override essentially a particular body of people in their recognition of such. And certainly the concern that was brought forth was it would have to be for protection, like example law enforcement to protect the people, the other to have one group essentially protected from another group. But in terms of international law, in terms of public safety, this is essentially tourism, and it doesn't rise to the level of public safety to assert that this project should go forward. So I certainly on protection of sacred sites, I don't see that it reaches that level. And for me, that is going to be essentially the reason I will be not in support of this kind of project. Not only for Navajo, but also for Hopi. You learn about the people that actually have dreams, visions, and they're called essentially in such to be able to visit that salt trail. There's a larger issue in terms of maintaining and protecting sacred sites, and that is to have indigenous peoples all around the world be able to maintain that connection with Mother Earth, to bless, to heal, to restore harmony, for protection. And when we essentially negate that ability, it's not, these things aren't done just on behalf of Navajo. There's indigenous peoples all around the world that help all five-fingered people in maintaining that connection for all of humanity. And it needs to be recognized and raised to a higher standard level. Thank you.
Okay. We have three more that wants to speak, delegates here. Mr. Naabik'iyati, then Mr. Butler. Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem Chair, and also my colleagues here that are on the floor here. I don't know presenters, so it's not Zagi. Don't know Yagi, but have any interest in some of the items that is before us here on the agenda here. And welcome you to this discussion here. First of all, I'm trying to weigh my time and in a way way to put a value to it is somewhat not aligned to my duties and responsibilities in a way to address some of these important issues here. Speaking from that point right now, we are putting our input into this item here. But however, we're really dealing with an assumption, and we're really just kind of going about our way and saying whatever we want to say, and that has a little value. We don't have the agreement, the negotiated agreement, or we don't have what is proposed. We don't have any of that material that will allow us to absorb and to have a serious discussion to make the difference for the community members and for the people that are representing, that are making presentation here and that are making the argument. No decision is going to be made here. So I think it's important to the real material that comes about, and that would help us to determine that. I think that's worth more valuable time for us to spend on in that fashion. And this is just a report. So, hey, Evans, this is case. So I hope my colleagues will take those to heart. And let's get on to these other businesses. These are reports, and we've heard it from the other group, and now we've heard this from the other group. And so I think that should be sufficient enough to go forth and allow us to maybe look forward to the legislation that would allow us to be a little more absorbed into the information here. Could I comment Mr. Dempsey?
Okay, so we can make the motion to cease debate. Mr. Butler. Two more after that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem Chairman. I think that this is a very important issue to discuss, and this is our opportunity when we bring it before this body to ask questions even in a report format. So if you're not interested in listening to the report, you're welcome to leave the chamber as well, I think. Mr. Pro Tem Chair, I wanted to let both sides here know that I'm 50-50 on this issue. I still remain 50-50 on this issue, and I continue to be on the fence regarding this important issue within our region of Tuba City and Botaway Gap. And I do acknowledge both sides and their concerns regarding the argument that it is a sacred site, as well as the other supporters of the project that consider it to be an economic development venture, which is very badly needed within our former Bennett Freeze area, which we all know has been frozen for more than 40 years, and there's been no development of any kind. And we do need jobs in Western Navajo, Mr. Chairman, and jobs are important. Jobs keep families on the Navajo Nation. Jobs keep families, giving them the ability to provide for their families, to put food on the table for their children, to provide a roof over their heads, to provide clothing on their backs, and to provide them the ability to be independent as well, and to provide for their families. And Mr. Chairman, there's been some issues the last 3.5 years that have come before this council regarding sacred sites. And I'm in belief that every square inch of the Navajo Nation is sacred to the Navajo people. It is sacred. Every inch of this Navajo Council chamber is sacred to the people as well. Every square inch of Window Rock, Tuba City, Canyon Escalade, Monument Valley, the Grand Canyon Confluence is all sacred to us. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to continue to listen to both sides. And what comes to mind, Mr. Chairman, is I have heard more support for the project than I have for people opposing it. And I listen to the people as well. And people want jobs. People want to help their families and provide for their families as well. And I was talking to one of the constituency from Wrongdoings. It's a small family, a young family, maybe in their mid-20s. The father is about 26, 27 years old now. And he came up to me and talked to me and said, Mr. Butler, I would like for you to vote yes on this Grand Canyon Escalade project. And I asked him, I said, why? Tell me why you want me to vote yes. Why are you lobbying me? Tell me why. He said every morning, 5 days a week, he has to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 3. His kids that are school age have to ride the bus to Page Unified School District every morning from Wrongdoings. He gets them ready, his wife cooks breakfast, he takes the kids about 1.5 miles down the road to the bus stop on 89. Those kids have to ride the bus for about 45 minutes to an hour to get to school. From then, he starts off his 2.5-hour trip to get to work. He drives to St. George, Utah to work at the Walmart distribution plant for about 12 hours a day. Comes back late in the evening. And his wife says, I want my husband home in the evening. And if this Grand Canyon Escalade project is built and they offer jobs, my husband will be able to work locally and to earn a paycheck. So he doesn't risk his life going to work, driving 2.5 hours on a dangerous road on 89 to St. George, Utah. So that story always resonates with me. It resonates in every discussion I have with people in regards to this project. But I am also listening to the grassroots people as well. And I've had many discussions with Shanella, Mary Martin Zagany regarding this as well. And I remember also, Mr. Chairman, 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago, we had one of the opposers. Her name is Dolores Aguirre from Tuba City, from the impacted area. She came to the Navajo Hopi Land Commission, and she made it clear, and she's on record for saying, I am not against economic development, I am not against the project, I am only against how we are going about moving forward with this. And she says, we want more community involvement. We want to be seated at the table as well. So there seriously needs to be some kind of, it was suggested perhaps a task force or some kind of body to mitigate and to be a buffer between these two groups, because I truly believe we need economic development in Western Navajo. 40 plus years is too long waiting for people to have jobs. But we also need to have everybody within the area agreeable to what kind of plans are placed for this area for economic development. Mr. Chairman, those are my thoughts that I wanted to share with you all. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Butler, Mr. Jonathan Nez. Then Mr. Sosi. We'll give it back to the presenters and go ahead and call for the question. Mr. Nez.
After me again, huh? Thank you, Chairman Pro Tem, members of the Naabik'iyati Committee.
Questions.
You know, as we debate this item, it reminds me of the folks in Ojeta that live within the Monument Valley Tribal Park, and how, I guess, as they see it, winter rock intruding on their livelihood, intruding on their land. There was a proposed project there, and I say was, to create a similar project, a tram, going from the bottom where the view is at Monument Valley all the way up to one of the buttes for visitors to have that scenic look. The community, the chapter, overwhelmingly, super majority, through a resolution, said no to this project. And the park, our Parks Department, Parks and Recreation, acknowledged that and said, okay, if the people don't want it, then fine. And so they backed off on that project. And I appreciate that. That's the voice of the people. And I say super majority. I think it was like 2 in favor, 3 in favor, or something like that, but most of them were non-supportive. But in this case, it's almost right down the middle. You know, there was a mention of a referendum. There is time for a referendum. As you know, I have a legislation before you today approving a ballot measure. Maybe that's something to consider for the affected chapters. I know it seems like we're just pushing it off, not making a decision, but you know, I mean, if we're going to really have the people give us that answer, maybe that's what needs to happen, a referendum. You know, we heard on Monday by some of these presidential candidates saying that Winter dictates projects throughout Navajo. I remember one individual saying that Gray Mountain was one of those, and tell Winter Rock to stay out of the Gray Mountain wind project, the wind turbine project. You know, if the people want it, we shouldn't stand in the way of it. But if they don't want it, then, you know, I mean, that's their decision. Some want economic development. Communities such as Ojeto, Monmouth Valley want to keep the land pristine, the way it is. I mean, we can use the sacred site part of it, and we can throw that out when it's convenient. But a lot of people want it pristine, just the way it is. Believe it or not, my colleagues, there are a lot of communities out there that want to live like the past, without any development. And we just got to respect that. And people want to live, want to still haul water, want to still be able to do things just the way, and a lot of the young people are wanting to do that the same way too. So, you know, those are things that we need to remind ourselves, and we need to remember that some of our people do not want economic development. We always throw economic development out there and say, oh, this is what our people want, this is what our people need. Is it really? You know, we got rural communities that are willing to be more sustainable, have some type of, going back to initiation of farming and livestock. More power to them for wanting to do that and staying the way it is. And the other question that comes to mind is the agreement. I appreciate Mel bringing it up, Mr. Brigade bringing it up. What's the details in the agreement? You know, I have yet to see it. How much of that revenue goes back to the impacted chapters? 5%? 10%? You know, the gaming monies that's supposed to be making a lot of money, some of those money is supposed to go back to the impacted community or the host chapter. You know, if the people want economic development, I would say that they should have a percentage allocated for their development in their communities. So, you know, those are things that I'm listening to, and you know, as was mentioned, you know, the discussion here is about the Grand Canyon on the Navajo Nation side. The question that I would like to ask many of the people that are, you know, running around pushing this project is, you know, have they really been to the site? Have they been down to the confluence to experience it by hiking down there? That's what Grand Canyon was all about, the experience. And then now you have helicopters, airplanes. I think the last time I went to the confluence, which was a few months ago, all I heard was airplanes and helicopters. And I thought that was supposed to be the quietest place on earth. You know, I don't know. We need to stand up as a Navajo Nation to regulate some of this air traffic in the Grand Canyon. There's just so much traffic out there. That's all you hear. I went rim to rim a couple of months ago, or last month. That's all you hear is helicopters. So we need to address that with the federal government's department. So, you know, I'd like to see the agreement, and I think either we give it to a referendum to the affected communities, or someone please introduce this bill. Let's address it. We're just going over and over and over and over on this. Let's make a decision and move forward on it. So, you know, I just wanted to mention that, Speaker or Chairman Pro Tem. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ariz, Mr. Solsi, then we'll go ahead and give it back to the presenters. Once the presenters respond back, then we'll go ahead and call for the question. Call it. Mr. Solsi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This is interesting, though. Jonah, yo yapan yatke, kalit al nabat ilni, hagolan hilatil ah, hagilais ilni lo, tida ninas diyago in agnas gato. You know, I'm confused too. And I realize I'm not wise. But when we argue, and I acknowledge the words of Delegate Butler, when people say that everything is sacred, how are we going to do economic development? There's no way we can do it if you come with that argument. And I remember hearing from people that the area between the four sacred mountains is sacred. And that's why, one of the reasons why we should not leave it. But we've reconciled those comments and those positions, because every day we travel outside the four sacred mountains. Every day. And we have not been struck down as a result. We've asked for forgiveness. Every day we do this. And so, I think when we do this, and I understand, and nobody's going to develop a tramway in my backyard. It's not as scenery as Grand Canyon. But I don't mind that either. I like my early morning, Saturday morning walks. But I think, you know, how do we square this, though, when some Navajo persons don't want economic development? Should we all have them sign a letter and say that I do not want economic development, therefore I forego any employment offers or any employment for my family? Or any requests from the Navajo Nation, because I don't want it. Is that how we do it? How do we address these things when people don't want economic development? Do we then call these people up and say, turn in your cell phones, turn in your TV, turn in your 4x4 trucks if you don't want economic development? How do we square this? The reality is that we are going so far, we've gone so far, and we just have to acknowledge that we have progressed to a certain degree. I think the wagon days are over. And this is why we need to seriously change the Grazing Act. You know, as much as we say that we hold sheep sacred and livestock sacred, we let what? Puppies herd sheep now. You know, we have ATVs herding sheep. And this causes confusion to me. when people argue about the sacredness, those lay, Hashat aye what our nature. Origin alone, obviously, then should be here. Of course, you would answer. According now, I dashed here. The Zada again, I should jail here and pay. The Nane don't get this hinter. Eshin Nanat, Annie, then Lenny, I dashed him there. Clatadoin Sada, Clatadodis Sada. Benani do be tego yadat here. A wait answer. A cojot the net no ea, not tinny son he sala. A coquashin so in there, and Kazazan Lemata, Kichodan Lemata. Loans on that the cow, Anna Ishia taking another ija. Ye had the edo, ye stark. Did Ahonan Ouch? Nastin Hatchin, ye statoka. Nastin Junoin Nachi Eta your later. Don't sonship. A coco. But that said, Bandit, not dini. Hashat I digi wazo digin hat no. As tudo sani da jizana leda aro chang da tsi. Hashat I betsin shkejita klawazo da hoya da but no da but ochi. Hashat I ari chang da skada. Karidan khan tio in da hanashi nenti j. Opposite, was het lichtouwtje, had de snuddelkit die schieten. Ik hoor even nani, kan dit auto, niet dat die er, na niets aan niet krijgt. Nee, zou die een zende, gaat zien neder, maar me aan. Zodat later ziet die genoeg was aan. Gouverneur P. Ja. Aan Javaho. Wat in het opbeestnas, aro, dan tjinokfisch, ga je kamwaat in en desasle. Ga de eden net iets aanhouden. Atten. Aro lesses na jenaki chopat, abajamsa. Ge ari chana ashfa. Atten. Ako ko de nai da ema shiti ati yendi ne aria to pata huidiano tinka manasa ashin son kheden ani akai shido shit khat na lendi bo kit iskinta but ad nashi adatio ako benani ki edi koti. But I want to tell the presenters, though, that I agree, though, you need to put a time limit on this. I don't know if we want to do it directly today. Every day that you do not give us the agreement, you're beginning to lose my vote. And I mean it. If you continue to just hold off on this by October, November, I will probably vote no. Why are you holding off on it? And if I sense greediness in here against the Navajo Nation, I will vote no. Navajo Nation, Navajo people should not be taken advantage of. Work with us. If you care about Navajo people, if you care about Navajo Nation, work with us. And respect our jurisdiction too. You put a clause in there that says you don't want oversight or jurisdiction, I will vote against it. Because those are things that we care about, and if we sense damage to it, we should have the relief to provide for oversight. Yes, go make your returns. But don't be greedy in such a way that you want 80% return. Maybe 51%, maybe 55%. You're not going to go poor by doing it. Because you're making, there's a big scenery out there. And I think that's why, give us your proposal very soon. And I don't know if we should do a directive, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, to do this. Because I think at a certain point we have to cut it off. I don't want the continued agitation at Waterway Chapter. Got to put a stop to that. The only way to put a stop to it is get into the same room sooner, give us a proposal, and let's vote it up or down. And then also, I've seen some unkind letters to Navajo Nation from the partners demanding certain things. That never works with us. Respect Navajo Nation. Whether it's letters to DOJ or to the president. Work with us to work this out. Because as Navajo people say, we may be gone, but the land will remain for future generations. But if you want to do it in our times, work with us. And I recommend strongly that you give us a proposal, maybe within 30 days. You've been at this thing too long. Give us a proposal in 30 days. And if nobody is willing to sponsor it, I'll sponsor it for you. So we can get the talks going. Ozai banja kiro. Ozai yimnad nesa chi nito. Can't nas nasho. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Sosi, my colleagues, what we're going to do right now, I know we talked about this, and I know it's important. The presenters, you got some directives here, which is to produce more documentation, such as surveys, and also to possibly get a legislation done. So I would ask the presenters that if you want to go ahead, we all into what the delegates have said. Ask that you respectfully ask that the next NABI that you do another report based on what was given here. Okay? So, with that, my colleagues, with the directives that were all made, my colleagues, let's go ahead and vote on the report. All in favor of the report, raise your hand. Staff, can you please count? High, raise your hand high, Mr. Mel, okay? No, you're tired right now, but I know you've been to a few country concerts and you raised your hands. I'm tired of that. Okay, let's go on. 9 in favor, opposed? Okay, 4 opposed. Okay, thank you, presenters.